Morning, everyone, and welcome to another webinar organised by the London School of Emerging Technology. My name is Kelly, and I'll be your host for today's session. On behalf of everyone at LSET, thank you for taking the time to join us. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur, an early-stage startup founder, a business owner, or simply someone exploring how to build a successful business, we're delighted to have you with us. At LSET, our mission is to bridge the gap between education, innovation, and entrepreneurship by bringing together experienced founders, industry experts, investors, and business leaders who can share practical insights that help entrepreneurs make better decisions. Today's webinar forms part of our Entrepreneur Growth Series, where we explore the real challenges founders face while building and growing their businesses. Today's session is titled The Customer Compass: Navigating Your Way to the Right Audience. One of the biggest misconceptions in entrepreneurship is that if you build a great product, customers will naturally find you. Unfortunately, that's rarely how successful businesses are built. Many startups fail not because they have a poor product, but because they have never truly understood who their customers are, what problems they experience, or why they make buying decisions. Today's webinar is designed to help you avoid those mistakes. Throughout the session, we'll explore how to identify your ideal customers, understand customer behaviour, build meaningful customer relationships, and create marketing strategies that attract the right audience, rather than simply reaching more people. Whether you're launching your first startup or looking to grow an existing business, today's discussion will provide practical strategies that you can immediately apply to your own entrepreneurial journey. It's now my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Joining us today is Amy Kohl, founder of The Female Founder, a thriving community, education and mentorship platform dedicated to supporting women entrepreneurs across Manchester and in the Northwest. Through workshops, mentorship programs, business education, networking events, and her podcast, Coffee with a Female Founder, Amy has helped countless founders transform business ideas into sustainable companies. Alongside leading The Female Founder, Amy also serves as a startup advisor at the London School of Emerging Technology, where she mentors pre-seed founders, helping them refine business models, develop investor-ready business plans, and build compelling pitch decks. Having worked closely with entrepreneurs at every stage, from validating business ideas to attracting customers and preparing for investment, Amy brings a wealth of practical experience and understands the real challenges founders face when trying to grow a business from the ground up. We're delighted to have her with us here today to share her expertise. Amy, thank you so much for joining us. And I'll hand over to you.
What a gorgeous introduction. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. It's always great to see so many entrepreneurs, founders, and business professionals taking their time out of their day to invest in their learning. So one of the questions that I get asked the most often by founders is, how do I get more customers? Which is obviously a completely understandable question. But I've always kind of realized that this is not the right question to be asked. The better question is, am I trying to attract the right customers? Because attracting customers is relatively easy, especially if you don't have enough advertising budget. Building relationships with the right customers, the people who genuinely need your solution, that stay loyal to your business, recommend you to others, and become advocates for your brand. And that's where sustainable business growth actually begins. So throughout my work with The Female Founder, and obviously as a startup advisor for LSET, I've worked with founders from many different industries. And the one thing that they all have in common is they usually start by talking about their product. Very few actually begin by talking about who their customer is. So today's webinar is really about changing that mindset. Instead of thinking like you're a business owner, I want you to think like you are your customer. Because when you truly understand your customer, every decision becomes so much easier. So your marketing becomes easier, product development becomes easier, pricing becomes easier, and obviously customer retention also becomes easier. So by the end of today's session, I hope that you'll leave with practical tools that help you better understand who your target audience is and build a much stronger, more meaningful relationships with the people that you're trying to serve. So let's get started.
Thank you, Amy. I think that's a fantastic way to begin today's session, because so many entrepreneurs immediately focus on promoting their product before they fully understood who they're trying to help, which naturally brings us to our first slide, the customer compass, navigating your way to the right audience. I really like the title of today's webinar because a compass gives direction before a journey begins. Why did you choose the customer compass as the theme for today's discussion? And why do you believe customer understanding should come before marketing, branding, or even sales?
So I love this analogy because it's exactly how I think about customer understanding. So imagine that you're setting off on a journey without knowing where you're going. You might have a great car, loads of fuel, loads of enthusiasm, but without knowing the exact direction, you're probably going to waste time, energy, and obviously your resources. And building a startup business is very similar. So many founders invest heavily in creating websites, designing logos, building products, and launching marketing campaigns. But all this before they've actually truly understood who their customer is. And in reality, customer understanding becomes the foundation for every single business decision that you make. As I said before, it influences how you describe your product, how you price it, where you market it, and even how you develop new features. One of the biggest lessons that I've learned through working with founders is that customers don't just fall in love with the products that you have. They fall in love with the solutions and the problems that they actually experience. So your business becomes the compass, and that should always point towards your customer. If you understand their challenges, their frustrations, goals, motivations, every other business decision that you ever need to make becomes way clearer. And that's why today's session starts with the customer rather than the business itself.
I think it's a really powerful message because it's easy to become emotionally attached to our own ideas rather than focusing on what the customers actually need. So now that we understand why customers should be our starting point, the next question is, how do we actually find the right customer in the first place? So moving on to our next slide, how to find, understand, and attract your ideal customers. I think one thing is very clear. Every successful business starts with understanding people rather than simply building products. Many founders assume that finding customers is simply about marketing or advertising. Why do you think so many startups focus on attracting customers before they actually understand them?
It's such a good question because it is probably one of the biggest mistakes that I see founders make. So when people launch a business, their first instinct is to usually ask, how do I get customers? So they immediately start thinking about how to reach them, running ads, posting on social media, building a website, creating marketing campaigns. But marketing only really works when you know exactly who you're speaking to. So imagine you're walking into a room full of 100 people and you're trying to convince every single person to buy the same product. It would be really difficult because everyone has different needs, different priorities, and different motivations. And obviously business works in exactly the same way. So the first step, it isn't about attracting customers. It's about identifying the people who actually have the problem that you're trying to solve. So once you've identified that audience, the next question becomes then, where can I find them? So you need to understand where do they live? Are they active on LinkedIn? Do they spend time in Facebook communities? Are they going to networking events? Do they search on Google when they're looking for solutions? So understanding where your audience spends the most time, it will help you invest on where you put your marketing efforts. The third step is understanding what motivates their decisions. Customers rarely buy a product because it has more features. They buy it because they believe that it will solve their problem, that it will save time, it reduces their stress, it increases profits, or improves their life in some way. And then we kind of move to creating a customer persona. So this isn't the kind of top level stuff where it's talking about someone's age or job title. It's about understanding their goals, their frustrations, behaviors, and buying habits. The more detailed your understanding is, the easier it becomes to communicate with them in a way that feels really relevant and authentic. And then finally, everything leads to business growth. So once you know who your customers are, they spend time where they spend the time, and what motivates them. Attracting and retaining those customers becomes far more natural to you as a business owner. So you're no longer trying to convince every single person in that room. You're speaking directly to the people who genuinely need your product or solution.
I really like that point because it kind of changes the mindset from how do I sell to who am I actually helping. I imagine that also makes marketing much more efficient because you're focusing your efforts in the right direction rather than trying to reach everyone. But when founders think they know who their customers are, it doesn't always tend to turn out to be true, does it? So let's move to the next slide because I think this is something many entrepreneurs experience. Every successful business starts with one customer. Amy, I really like the title of this slide because it's a great reminder that no successful company started with millions of customers. For founders who are just starting out, it can sometimes feel overwhelming when they compare themselves to companies like Amazon, Spotify, or Airbnb. Why is it important to focus on one customer first rather than trying to reach thousands straight away?
So, like you said, I love this slide because it does remind us that every successful business that we obviously admire starts in the exact same place. And before I answer your question, please don't compare yourself to Amazon and Airbnb because it's not relevant. Not yet. But when we do look at companies like Amazon and Airbnb, we do see the finished product. You obviously see millions of users, global recognition, billion-dollar business ideas, but we do forget that they all started by solving one problem for one person. So yeah, as founders, we do put ourselves under too much pressure, unnecessary amount of pressure, and we think that we need hundreds of customers in the first few weeks or thousands of followers before we can actually say we're a successful business owner. And that's not entirely true. So your customer, your very first customer, is incredibly valuable because they can teach you things that no business book or course or webinar or market report ever can. They tell you why they chose your business, what problem that they wanted to solve, and what nearly stopped them from buying, and then what they value most about your solution. And those conversations are where you're going to get the most value at the beginning. So instead of focusing on the big numbers, I always encourage founders to focus on learning. Literally never, ever stop being a student. Even when you get to Amazon and Airbnb level, never stop being a student. Learn every single day. Because every customer interaction gives you information that's going to help you improve your product. It's going to help you refine your messaging and understand your audience on a much more deeper level. So this slide also highlights 5 important questions that every founder should continually ask themselves. So number 1 is, who exactly am I serving? 2 is, where can I consistently reach them? 3 is, what influences their buying decisions? 4 is, how can I create a customer profile that guides future business decisions? And then finally, how can I turn those insights into long-term growth? And when you answer these questions honestly and consistently, your business becomes much more focused and growth becomes intentional rather than just an accident. So one satisfied customer often leads to another through referrals, recommendations, and positive experiences. Sustainable businesses aren't built by chasing every single person in that room. They're built by serving the right people really well.
Yeah, that's a really encouraging message for anyone who's just beginning their entrepreneurial journey. Reminds us that success isn't measured by how many customers you have on day one, but how well you understand and serve the first few who choose to trust your business. However, even after identifying our audience, founders often discover something surprising, that the customers they expected aren't always the ones who actually buy. So let's explore that in our next slide. Who is your customer, really? The customer you want may not be your customer. I think this is one of the great slides because it challenges something almost every founder experiences. When people start a business, they usually have a picture in their mind of who their customer is. But very often, once they launch, they discover something completely different. Why does this happen? And why is it so important for founders to keep an open mind during those early stages?
That is such a good question because this is something that I see almost every week when I'm working with founders. So when we start a business, we're obviously going to naturally make assumptions. We think, oh, I really think that young professionals are going to love this product, or small businesses are going to be my target audience, or even that like everyone can benefit from what I'm offering. But it's not always the case, and most of the time it's very different. So once your product or service reaches the market, your customers start telling you a story that you might not have actually expected. You might discover that a completely different audience is engaging with your content. They're asking questions or they're purchasing your product. And sometimes a niche market that you hadn't even considered before becomes your strongest customer base. And obviously, this is not a bad thing. It's actually one of the most valuable learning opportunities for a startup. And then one of the biggest mistakes that I see founders make is that they become too attached to their original assumptions, and they continue marketing to the audience that they imagined instead of paying attention to the audience that's actually responding. Like I said, every day is a learning day, but also every successful founder stays curious. They observe who's visiting their website. They look at the comments on their social media posts. They analyze who books a meeting, who buys their products. And most importantly, they ask those customers, what made you choose us? And that question often reveals insights that completely reshape the business strategy. I always encourage founders to treat their first customers as research partners. Every conversation that you have teaches you something. Every piece of feedback helps you understand your market more clearly. And rather than asking, why isn't my target audience buying? You need to ask yourself, who is actually buying? And then what can I learn from them? And sometimes the market knows your ideal customer before you actually do. And the founders who listen carefully at those questions, they're able to adapt quickly. And they're usually the ones that build a much stronger and much more sustainable business.
I think that's a really powerful message because it's easy to become emotionally attached to our own ideas rather than focusing on what customers actually need. So now that we understand why customers should be our starting point, the next question is, how do we actually find the right customers in the first place? Let's move to our next slide. How to find, understand, and attract your ideal customers. Ooh, hang on, sorry. Bear with me a minute. Having a little technical glitch. Or rather, we're moving on to
Slide 5, start with the problem, not the product.
Bear with me just 2 seconds. What has happened here? Okay, bear with me. Might be a minute, folks. Sorry about this. Just having a little internet connection problem. Right. Might be a minute. Okay, let's try again then. I think all this hot weather has confused my computer. Where are we? So Start with the problem, not the product. Okay, there we go. Yes, then why do you think founders should focus on the customer's problem before talking about their own product?
So I think this is one of the biggest mistakes that founders make. And it's assuming that their customers care about their products as much as they do. As founders, we naturally become excited about the features, technology, or the amount of time that we've invested in building something. It's our baby, like we love it so much. But the customers obviously don't see that journey, and they kind of just want a solution to the problem that they're facing. So you need to think about your own purchasing decisions when you're looking for a software, service, or even something like an app on your phone. You're not thinking, I hope this has 10 amazing features. You're thinking, will this save me time? Will this solve my problem? Is it worth the money? And that's exactly how your customers think. So instead of asking, how do I explain what my product does? You need to start asking, what challenge does my customer wake up with every morning? And once you understand that challenge, your messaging becomes much more meaningful because you're speaking directly to their needs rather than just listing a load of features that you have. So I encourage you to write down these 3 questions. What problem am I solving? Why is this problem important? And what changes for my customer? What changes for my customer after using my solution? So if you can answer those questions really clearly, you're already building a much stronger brand because people connect with solutions and not just features and specifications.
Amy, you've mentioned companies like, once we understand the customer's problems, how do successful companies continue improving their understanding over time? So let's move to the next slide. Slide 6. The customer understanding advantage. Amy, you've mentioned companies like Amazon, Spotify, and Netflix throughout today's session. These organizations seem to know exactly what their customers want. What are they doing differently, and what can startups learn from them?
This is such a good question because I think many founders think these companies are successful just because they have huge budgets. And in reality, their biggest advantage isn't advertising, it's understanding. These companies consistently study their customers' behaviours. They look at what people search for, what they click on, what they ignore, what they buy repeatedly, and then even when they stop using a product. So every single interaction that a customer has becomes really valuable information. Now, I know some founders might be thinking, that's fine for Amazon, but I don't have millions of customers to look at the data. And that is good news because you don't need to have millions. Like we said before, you can just start with one customer. So as a startup, your advantage is actually closer relationships with your customers. Netflix can't speak one-on-one with their customers all the time, but you can. You can have conversations with them. You can ask them questions. You can collect direct feedback. And one conversation with a customer can completely change the direction of your business. So the lesson is really simple. Don't collect customers, collect insights. The more that you understand people's behaviors, frustrations, expectations, the better your business becomes. And that's what creates long-term growth.
I guess really it's capitalizing on that quality data and the depth that you can get while you are small. And it's a brilliant point because startups often underestimate how valuable direct customer conversations can be. So if understanding customers is so important, how do founders actually gather those insights in a structured way? Let's have a look. The customer insight engine. I really like the phrase customer insight engine. It suggests that learning about customers should be an ongoing process rather than something founders just do once. Can you explain how startups can build this habit?
Absolutely. So customer insight isn't something that you just do once and then forget about it. Your customers are constantly changing. The market evolves, the technology changes, competitors introduce new ideas, and that means that founders need a system for continuously learning. I always recommend these 4 simple sources of insight. So first is obviously talk to your customers regularly. Ask them open-ended questions. What made you choose us? What nearly stopped you from buying? And what could we improve? Second, you need to actually listen to that customer feedback. So you can find that in reviews, emails, LinkedIn comments, social media conversations, and support requests as well. And they often highlight opportunities that you hadn't considered before. And third, you need to observe that behavior. So sometimes a customer tells us one thing, but does something completely differently. Have you ever gone to hairdressers where you're sat down and you're like, I really love it, and then go home and cry? That's exactly what it's about.
Unfortunately, yes.
So how they actually use your product often provides even more valuable information. And then finally, we need to learn from our competitors, not by copying them, but identifying the gaps in the market that your business can then go and fill. When you combine all of these different sources of information, you begin making decisions based on evidence, and then you can forget about the assumptions that you've made before. And that's exactly how your business is going to improve year on year.
It's incredibly practical, isn't it? Because it shows founders that customer research doesn't have to be complicated or expensive. Sometimes it's just simply about listening and listening carefully. So we've spoken a lot about understanding customers, but ultimately every customer has a choice. Why should they choose your business instead of someone else's? So let's explore that in our next slide. Why should customers choose you? Amy, we spent quite a bit of time talking about understanding, as we've discussed, but even when founders understand their audiences well, they're still competing with other businesses offering similar products or services. So what really influences a customer's decision to choose one business over another?
So I think many founders believe that customers always choose the cheapest option, but that's actually rarely true. You need to think about your own buying behavior here. When you're making a really important purchase, is the automatic always to go to the cheapest product? Sometimes yes, but absolutely not always. You probably compare different reviews online, you look for recommendations, you check whether the company actually feels trustworthy. You consider their customer service, reliability, ease of use, whether the business actually understands your needs as well. So customers make decisions based on value, and it's not always about the price. And this is where startups obviously have that huge opportunity. So you might not have the biggest marketing budget, but you can always offer a better experience. You can respond faster, you can build genuine relationships, you can personalize your service, and you can listen more carefully over the larger competitors. And I often tell founders this: people might forget your product, but they'll always remember how your business made them feel. If customers feel understood and respected and supported, they're far more likely to buy from you again and then also recommend you to other people. Your competitive advantage isn't always having something completely different. Sometimes it's about delivering the same service that your competitors are delivering, but in a much, much better way. And that's why trust, authenticity, and consistency are so important. They become your strongest marketing tools.
It's such an important reminder, because many startups focus on competing on price when they really should be competing on experience. Now, once founders have identified their audience and created a unique value proposition, the next challenge is actually putting those ideas into practice. So let's move on to our next slide. Stop waiting for perfect and start testing. Amy, I know this is something many entrepreneurs struggle with. People often spend months trying to find that perfect product before showing it to the customers. Why do you believe testing is more important than waiting for perfection?
This is my favorite topic. I literally say this so often. just a little quick story time. When I first started my first business, I actually launched a year before my first product was ready.
Wow.
I was just going out there trying to find my audience the whole time, and I wasn't ready to do so, but it was the best thing that I ever did. So yeah, this is just the best topic. So many founders delay launching because they think, my website's not ready, my logo isn't perfect, I just need one more feature, or I'll launch next month. But here's the reality. Your customers don't expect perfection. They actually don't know what perfection is. Only you do up here. They expect a lot of value, obviously. So some of the world's biggest companies started with very simple versions of what their product actually looks like today. So obviously Instagram looks nothing like it did today. Airbnb began with a really basic website. Dropbox validated its idea with a short demonstration video before building the full product. The reasons these companies succeeded is because they didn't wait until everything was perfect. They launched early, and then they listened, and then they improved. And every customer interaction then became feedback. And then every piece of feedback that they gained helped them build something better. So I do always encourage founders to think of this as a business continuous experiment. Instead of asking, will this work? Ask, what can I learn? So when you adopt that mindset, mistakes become lessons instead of failures. Testing helps you obviously reduce risk. It helps you understand your customer preferences, and most importantly, it prevents you from investing months of building something that no one actually wants. Progress beats perfection every single time.
I guess you could kind of say that progress is perfection, really, isn't it? Because of this ideal that we have in our head that nobody else can see. It's such practical advice. I think many founders hold themselves back simply just waiting for that perfect time, when in reality, the best way to learn is by getting that real feedback from real customers. And now that we've explored understanding customers, building trust, and testing ideas, let's take a moment to reflect on everything we've discussed so far. Amy, throughout today's webinar, we've covered customer understanding, behaviour, and identifying the right audience and testing ideas. If you had to summarise the biggest lesson for founders from everything we've discussed so far, what would it be?
Good question. So every slide that we've discussed comes back to the one central idea. Successful businesses don't start with a product, they begin with people. So as founders, we often become excited about ideas, but our customers don't see the business the way that we do. They see their own problems, they see their own challenges and their own goals. And it's our responsibility as founders to understand those needs before trying to sell a solution. So if there's one thing that I encourage people to do after today's webinar, is to spend more time talking to your customers rather than talking about what your business actually does. Ask those questions, listen carefully, observe those behaviors, and don't assume that you already know those answers. And also be willing to adapt your business, your features, your marketing based on that feedback. The businesses that continue learning are the businesses that continue growing. And remember that customer understanding isn't something that you achieve once. It's something that you continually have to keep improving on throughout the life cycle of your business. And that's what creates long-term success.
I think that's a perfect summary of today's discussion. And building your business isn't about having all the answers. It's about continually learning from the people that you're trying to serve. Now, before we conclude today's webinar, let's look at how founders can continue developing these skills beyond today's session. Questions, reflections, and discussions. Amy, thank you for taking us through such a practical and insightful session. I think many of us have realised today that understanding customers isn't just a marketing activity. It's really the foundation of building a successful business. And before we look to some more questions, if you could leave our audience with one key message from today's discussion, what would it be?
Thank you so much. So if there's one thing that I want everyone to remember from today, it's to stop trying to sell to everyone and start solving the problems for one person. There's this thing, if you try to sell to everyone, you're not selling to anyone. And I do feel like that is one of the biggest mistakes that founders can make, is believing that a larger audience automatically means more success. And in reality, successful businesses grow because they deeply understand a specific group of people and consistently deliver value to them. So throughout today's webinar, we've explored customer behaviour, customer personas, understanding motivations, testing ideas, and creating more meaningful customer experiences. And all these topics point to one thing. Your customer should always be at the centre of every single business decision. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't assume that they already know the answers. Speak to your customers regularly and collect that feedback, and then be willing to adapt based on that feedback. The businesses that succeed over the long term are the ones that never stop learning. Every conversation with a customer is an opportunity to improve your business. So rather than thinking of customer research as something that you do once, think of it as a habit that you have every week, every month, every year, whatever that looks like for you.
That's a fantastic takeaway. So just a few questions to think about at the end here. What's the biggest mistake that you see startup founders make when trying to identify their ideal customer?
I think that it's probably that they are talking to the wrong people. One of the things that I always say is talk to 10 strangers about your business rather than talking to friends, family. Like, you know, your mum might not be your target audience, so she's not going to give you the best advice.
It might be incredibly supportive
Yeah.
or unsupportive, depending on the mum. Can customer personas change as a business grows, and how often should founders revisit them?
They absolutely can change. So I've got like a little story about so Stanley, you know, the Stanley cups that are really popular at the moment. Their original audience was builders and construction workers, because their cup is obviously very durable and things, and it was made to be on a building site. Now the TikTok girlies have got hold of it and they're now completely and utterly pivoted who their target audience is, and they're launching pastel colors, like they're doing all sorts of things with TikTok girlies. But that's how a business grows. Like, they've obviously completely and utterly boomed because their audience has changed. And I don't think there is any kind of right formula for how often founders should revisit this. I think it's just natural ebbs and flows. Again, if you're constantly looking at the data, you're going to spot it before it's too late.
Yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it? If you've got your eye on the pulse, you'll notice if it's happening and if you need to consider it. Yeah. So how do you know when it's time to pivot your target audience instead of continuing with your original customer segment?
I think this again goes back down to the data that you're constantly keeping your eye on. And I think it's when you kind of notice, one, that your original customer target audience isn't buying from you anymore. But then also when you realize that there's a shift where your product is actually no longer serving the needs of that original customer.
Yeah, that makes sense. And for founders with very limited budgets, as is often the case at the beginning, what are 3 low-cost ways to better understand their customers?
So focus groups is a really good one. Just provide tea, coffee, a couple of biscuits. That's all they really need. Questionnaires is obviously a free thing. You can go onto Google Forms. Again, if you want to give them a little bit of an incentive, you can just do a £10 Amazon voucher or something along those lines. And then looking at the data that you already have, like all the softwares that you have, like your emails, your website, your social media, they all have analytics that you can look at. So yeah, they're the three low-cost ways.
Fab. And finally, How can startups build trust with customers when they're new and don't yet have money in reviews and testimonials?
So I think this is probably about building your personal brand. At the moment, the trend that we're in is people buy from people. People want to know who the founder is. So putting your face all over the marketing and getting people to trust you will mean that they trust your business.
Brilliant. Thank you, Amy, for those wonderful answers. Now let's bring today's session to a close. At LSET, we're passionate about supporting entrepreneurs beyond webinars. That's why we've created programs designed to help founders turn great ideas into successful businesses. Amy, as a startup advisor at LSET, could you tell me a little bit about the Startup Incubator and how it supports founders?
Absolutely. So one of the things I've learned over the years is that building a business can sometimes feel like a really lonely journey. Many founders have amazing ideas, but then struggle with questions like, am I solving the right problem? How do I attract my first customer? How do I prepare for investors? And then what should I focus on next? And that's exactly why programs like the LSAT Startup Incubator are so valuable to founders. So the incubator is designed to support founders from the very earliest stages of their entrepreneurial journey. So you will receive practical guidance on validating your business idea, refining your business model, developing customer acquisition strategies, preparing for investment by building pitch decks, and then connecting with mentors who have real startup experience. Me. One of the things that I enjoy the most about working with founders is seeing how quickly their business evolves once they actually start receiving the structured feedback and mentorship. And sometimes, honestly, one conversation changes a founder's direction. The incubator also creates something incredibly valuable, and that's obviously community. Entrepreneurship doesn't have to be a journey that you take on your own. Learning from other founders, sharing experiences, and receiving guidance from mentors often accelerates growth so much faster than trying to solve every single challenge independently. So if today's webinar has inspired you to take the next step, I'd certainly encourage you to explore the LSET Startup Incubator and see how it can support you in your business journey.
Sounds brilliant. Thank you, Amy. Sounds like a wonderful opportunity for anyone looking to move beyond learning and start putting these ideas into practice with expert support. And Amy, before we finish, I'd like to thank you for sharing your knowledge, practical advice, and real-world experience with us today. It's been a really insightful discussion. I'm sure anyone joining us has taken away valuable ideas that they can begin applying immediately. Before we say goodbye, is there one final piece of advice you'd like to leave with our audience?
Thank you so much, Kelly. Yeah, it's been a pleasure to speak with everyone today. So final thought would be, don't build your business around your product, build it around your customer. Your product's always going to evolve, markets will always change, technology will always advance, but businesses that genuinely understand who their customer is will always have a competitive advantage. They'll take time to listen, they'll ask meaningful questions, stay curious, and be willing to test new ideas. But most importantly, remember that every successful business started exactly where you are today, with one customer, one problem, and one opportunity to create value. You don't need thousands of customers tomorrow. You only need one customer to believe in what you're building. So focus on serving those customers really well, and then the growth will follow. So thank you so much for joining today's webinar. And I wish everyone so much success in their entrepreneurial journey. And I really hope to see you all again in future LSAT webinars. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you once again, Amy, for such an inspirational and practical session. And thank you for everyone who's joined us today. We hope today's discussion has given you a clearer understanding of how identifying the right customers, understanding their needs, and continuously learning from them can help you build a stronger and more sustainable business. If you've enjoyed today's webinar, we encourage you to stay connected with the London School of Emerging Technology through our website and social media channels, where we regularly share upcoming webinars, founder resources, startup opportunities, and events as part of our Entrepreneur Growth Series. We also encourage you to explore the LSET Startup Incubator if you're looking for mentorship, expert guidance, and practical support to help you grow your business. Thank you once again for spending your time with us today. On behalf of everyone at LSET, we wish you every success in your entrepreneurial journey. Have a wonderful day, and we look forward to welcoming